You know those nights when the exhaustion just feels heavier than usual? Yeah, this was one of those. After hours of driving all over Detroit, all I wanted was to call it a night. It was just a few minutes to midnight, and the streets were almost dead, only a few lights flickering here and there in the windows. But then my phone buzzed with a last-minute notification. One more delivery. I checked the address on the app. Porter Street, kind of out of the way in one of the less friendly parts of town. And there was an extra detail that caught my attention. The instructions said to leave the food on the 3rd floor of a building I'd never heard of, right at the last door down the hallway. You know how it is, you hesitate for a second, but the promise of a good tip wins out. I was already in the car, so I decided to go for this last run before heading home. The rain was coming down lightly, just enough to wet the windshield and make the streets darker and slicker. I turned on the headlights and set off. As I got closer to the address, the place started feeling even stranger. The few street lights barely illuminated the block, and the rain only made everything seem gloomier. The building looked like one of those places frozen in time. Broken windows, graffiti covering the walls, and mold stains everywhere. I could barely see much, just a lone, flickering street light near the entrance, like it was about to give out. The street was empty, and somehow the silence felt heavier here. I glanced back at the app, half thinking there'd been a mistake, but the address was right. I took a breath and parked the car. Grabbing the order from the passenger seat, I started walking toward the entrance. Every step echoed like the sound carried across the empty block. That feeling of unease grew with each step. When I got right up to the building, I thought I saw something move in one of the windows on the 3rd floor, but with the rain and the darkness, everything looked a bit blurred. I shook my head trying to brush it off. It was just another delivery. All I had to do was go in, drop off the food, and leave. As soon as I stepped into the building, the stench of mold and dust hit me instantly, like no one had set foot in there for months. The faint light from the street barely reached the entrance hallway, and in that silence, every sound felt amplified. I climbed the first few steps, and each creak echoed as if the whole building was protesting my presence. With each step, I questioned what I was doing there, but, well, I was already here. Might as well just get it over with. When I reached the 3rd floor, I immediately noticed it was darker than the rest of the building. The hallway was narrow, with bits of trash piled in the corners and peeling paint on the walls. At the end, I saw the last door slightly ajar. A dim, yellowish light flickered from a bulb overhead, flashing on and off every few seconds. I walked slowly toward it, my footsteps blending with the sound of dripping water from the ceiling. That's when I noticed something lying on the floor just in front of the door. It was a plain, white mask, one of those blank, expressionless ones. Next to it was a piece of rope. My whole body went tense. What would anyone be doing with that here? In that instant, the silence turned into something far more threatening. For a second, I thought about just leaving the food right there and turning around, but before I could react, I heard a sound from the end of the hallway. Footsteps. Quick and deliberate. I looked around, trying to find another way out, but I was trapped between the half-open door and the stairwell behind me. I tried to stay calm and back away slowly, aiming to reach the stairs without drawing attention. But as I backed up, I caught a reflection in the window next to the staircase. The glass showed a figure standing at the far end, unmoving, wearing a mask identical to the one I'd found on the floor. With each passing second, the reflection seemed closer, as if they were moving toward me. Survival instinct kicked in. I spun around and sprinted down the stairs, leaping over the last few steps to save time. Reaching the entry hall, I shoved against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Someone had locked it. Out of options, I went to a side window and pushed, trying to force it open. Managing to get it open just enough to squeeze through, I wriggled out, hearing hurried footsteps closing in behind me. I managed to squeeze through the window and jumped out, landing on the rain-soaked ground. I got up fast, not even glancing back, and sprinted toward the car. Raindrops mixed with sweat streaming down my face, and my hands shook so much that I nearly dropped the keys as I fumbled to unlock the car door. As soon as I got in and locked the doors, I took a deep breath, feeling my heart pounding erratically. I started the engine and glanced in the rearview mirror, but all I saw was the dark, abandoned building with faint, flickering lights in its empty windows. It felt like I'd escaped, but a lingering sense of danger still hovered in my mind. I drove to a gas station a few blocks away to pull myself together. After parking, I let out a relieved sigh, but before I could fully calm down, my phone buzzed in the holder. A notification from the app appeared on the screen. A new order, for the same address on Porter Street. I declined the request immediately and shut off the app. As I stared at the phone, the idea that it had all been some kind of trap started to settle in my mind. I couldn't shake the thought of who, or what, might have been waiting for me inside if I'd stayed just a little longer. I was wrapping up another long night of deliveries on the Las Vegas Strip, my eyes heavy with exhaustion and my patience nearly gone. It was one of those nights where the hustle never stopped, and just my luck, the delivery app pinged again. Another order. It was just a few minutes to midnight and I was more than ready to call it a night, but the tip looked good and I could use it. So I accepted. The destination caught me off guard. A nearly forgotten building wedged right there between the glitzy casinos directly across from the Bellagio. Strange for someone to order a delivery to a place like that, but with the way the night was going, it could just be a lost tourist or maybe someone from maintenance. It was just one more delivery and done, I thought. I took one last look at the bright lights of the Strip in my rearview mirror and headed on, the city's glow fading behind me as I drove closer to the shadowed building. I continued toward the address, still mulling over how strange it was for someone to order food to an abandoned building. The Strip was packed as always and traffic wasn't worse only because it was the middle of the night. Even so, I felt an urge to get there quickly, make the delivery and head home. As I drove, something odd caught my attention. A dark car behind me. It could have been a coincidence, sure, but this car was matching my speed perfectly. At every light I stopped at, it stopped too, and when I sped up, it did the same. I tried not to think too much about it, focusing on the route instead, but the feeling was unsettling. As I got closer to the address, the street started to empty out. Fewer cars, fewer lights. Soon, the crowds faded away behind me, and with each block closer to that building, I began to feel the weight of the silence around me, like I'd stepped into a different part of the city entirely. I parked in front of the building. It was even more ominous than it had looked on the GPS photos. A decaying structure with graffiti-covered walls and darkened windows. The Strip's bright lights glowed just behind me, but here, it felt like the light couldn't reach this spot. I got out of the car, grabbed the delivery bag and took a deep breath, scanning the area. The car that had been following me was now parked a few meters ahead, but it looked empty. Maybe it really was just a coincidence. Or was the driver just taking a break? I brushed it off and focused on the task. Just one more delivery. As I approached the entrance, the details grew more unsettling. Dark stains on the concrete, scraps of paper and broken glass littered the ground. It wasn't exactly the kind of place you'd expect someone to order food. I reached the door feeling a bit hesitant. I knocked twice, hoping for some response, but naturally there was none. I was about to set the order down and get out of there as fast as I could when I noticed something near my feet. Dark footprints, probably wet shoe prints, leading straight into the dark entrance. The situation was officially starting to feel strange. I dropped the package, trying to ignore the footprints. I decided I'd had enough and was ready to leave, but as I turned away from the building, I heard a noise. A muffled sound coming from somewhere inside. It froze me in place. Every instinct I had screamed that I shouldn't be here. I took a step back, ready to drop everything and bolt back to the car. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow on the sidewalk near where I'd parked. The same figure that had been tailing me in the car. The silhouette was closer now, standing still as if it were watching me. I tried to pretend I hadn't noticed, but my heart pounded, and my mind raced for a way to leave without looking panicked. Then the shadow took a step toward me. The tension was unbearable. He kept coming, slowly, deliberately, but without stopping. I glanced around, realizing I didn't have many escape options. The Strip's lights were visible in the distance, but here in this corner of the city, it was like I'd crossed into another realm, one where no one would see or hear a thing. I felt his footsteps closing in closer and closer. Without a second thought, I left the package on the ground and darted to the side, hoping to throw him off. I had to find an exit, Any route that would get me back to the strip and away from that stranger. I sprinted into the alley beside the building, a narrow, dimly lit path. My footsteps echoed off the walls, and my heartbeat was so loud it nearly drowned everything else out. Behind me, I heard heavier steps drawing closer. I didn't dare look back, focusing only on putting one foot in front of the other as fast as I could. I pushed forward through the alley, but it felt endless. Every corner I turned just led to another dark, winding passage. The lighting was almost non-existent, with only faint outlines and shadowy forms surrounding me. Finally, up ahead, I spotted an exit, a busier street, faintly illuminated, promising a breath of safety. With what little energy I had left, I sprinted toward it. When I reached the main street, relief washed over me like a wave. But even under the street lights and with people passing by, I felt exposed. I took a few cautious steps forward, scanning to see if my pursuer had followed me. I looked around, but all I saw were indifferent faces, each person moving along as if nothing had happened, oblivious to the panic I'd just escaped from. Finally safe, I stepped into a 24-hour convenience store and felt the weight of the night settle over me. Still catching my breath, I took in the artificial glow of the shelves, a sense of security gradually taking hold. I made a quick call to the police, reporting what had happened. In the quiet of that early morning, Las Vegas had never felt so empty. You know those nights when you're already exhausted before you even start? Yeah, that was me tonight, but I took another order anyway. I work as a delivery driver in Atlanta, and the night rates are better, hard to pass up, you know? I actually don't mind it. The empty city makes my job faster. But there's one spot that always makes me uneasy, let's say. Grady Memorial Hospital. Something about that old building at night just never sat right with me. Tonight, guess where the order was headed? Yep. And not just anywhere, the instructions were to go to the old wing, the nearly abandoned section. I was supposed to leave the food on a water fountain on the second floor. Weird, right? I spent a while just staring at the screen, wondering if it was worth it, but the bonus was decent. So I accepted. In the back of my mind, I told myself, it's just another delivery. What could go wrong? I arrived at the hospital, feeling like the place was quieter than usual. The illuminated facade and automatic doors welcomed me in, but something was off that night. Grady Memorial had never felt so empty. I stepped inside and glanced around. Just a few people at reception, a couple of security guards who looked more distracted than vigilant. I headed straight for the elevator, brushing off the uneasy feeling. It was just a delivery after all. But those instructions kept nagging at me. Second floor, old wing, nearly abandoned. It didn't feel like a standard order. I pressed the elevator button and waited. The slow-moving elevator seemed to take forever, and when the doors finally opened, a dim light flickered down the corridor. It wasn't just the silence. The hospital had that barely there light, and the hallway stretched out in front of me like it was daring me to keep going. I took a deep breath, stepping inside. Each step echoed louder than I expected. It felt like I was the only one there. Quick delivery, I told myself, forcing my pace a little faster, hoping it'd shake off the feeling that this corridor was far too quiet. Capitulo 3, a Tenseo Crest no corridor. As I walked further in, everything just felt worse. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, much longer than any part of the hospital I'd seen on past deliveries. My pace, which had started brisk, began to slow. A few flickering lights cast twisted shadows along the walls, shapes that seemed to move as if someone else was there. But it was just me. The water fountain was supposed to be at the end of the hall, or so the instructions said. I kept moving forward, but with every step, it felt like the place itself was watching. Each echo of my footsteps bounced back, almost like I wasn't alone. Only my own steps. At least that's what I told myself. I tried to ignore it, focusing on reaching the destination. Still, it felt like the hallway extended beyond what I could see. Every now and then, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting someone to appear. But there was only emptiness behind me. Almost there. I could see the fountain clearly now, an unmistakable shape lit at the end of the corridor. I tried to calm myself. It was just another delivery. but something deep down kept urging me to leave as fast as possible. No matter how much I tried to focus, a strange sense of urgency clawed at me, a need to escape that corridor and get back to the reception. But stubbornly I pressed on all the way to the end. I finally reached the water fountain, dropped the delivery on the floor, but an intense feeling of urgency made me turn around almost immediately. The moment I did, I heard footsteps, slow and dragging, coming from the far end of the corridor. Frozen, all I could focus on was the steady, deliberate sound of those steps, one after another, as if someone was heading straight for me, taking their time. With each backward step I took, the sound drew closer. I couldn't see clearly what it was. All I knew was that something or someone was there, moving directly toward me. The corridor that had seemed endless just moments ago now felt oppressively narrow, with a dark spot at the far end growing more threatening with every second. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but the footsteps continued, as if whoever was making them knew I had nowhere to go. The dim ceiling lights flickered with each step, and in each blink I strained to see better, but all I could make out was a shadow at the end of the hall. That was enough to shatter any last shred of calm I had. I started stepping backward faster, then practically ran toward the elevator, pressing the button over and over. The footsteps followed, steady and unrelenting, as if keeping pace with me. But as the elevator doors finally closed, the sound vanished. All I could do was stare straight ahead, praying the descent would end quickly. As soon as the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, I practically sprinted out. I glanced back just once, certain I'd see someone or something following me, but the hallway was empty. Still, the sense of urgency wouldn't fade. I crossed the lobby without saying a word to anyone, my only focus on reaching my car and getting away from that hospital. Finally, I got in, slammed the door, and started the engine, feeling my heart racing as though I'd just escaped something truly terrible. I didn't want to look back at the hospital again. Sitting in the car, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. It was strange, like that hospital had left a mark on me. My phone buzzed with another order, and for a moment I hesitated. I took another deep breath, gripping the steering wheel and staring out into the night. Maybe it was just another delivery.